as the Mighty Ogo. Thank you to Northern Perspectives for that shout out as well for the Mighty Ogo. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083C and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, October 17, 2022, the committee is meeting to consider matters related to the ArriveCan application. As always, a reminder not to put earpieces next to the microphones as it causes feedback and potential injury to our very vital translation department. Thank you very much. Welcome back, Mr. Firth, to Ogo. Just quickly, colleagues, just to explain, Mr. Firth's lawyer, Mr. Brent Timmins, will be with us throughout the meeting with his client. He is not, Mr. Timmins, though, is not a witness, and thus he may not address the committee. The council may be on Zoom call with the witness, and they may speak directly to their clients, but not to the committee or committee members. I note for committee members that they should only question the witness and not speak or ask questions of the lawyer who is not appearing as a witness. Mr. Firth may from time to time refer to and talk to Mr. Timmins, in which case he will turn off his mic. If it is during one of your interventions, we will pause the clock for that moment. We will suspend for 10 minutes after the first two rounds to give Mr. Firth and Mr. Timmins, as well as members, a break. And then after that, it'll be every 2 rounds we will break for, or we'll suspend for 5 minutes. My intent, colleagues, is to have the clerk swear in Mr. Firth, if that is fine with everyone. I see that, Mr. Clerk. We'll go ahead. And then we'll have Mr. Firth for an opening 5 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Firth, I just sent you an email. You have the choice of either a religious oath or a solemn affirmation. I'll perhaps give yourself and Mr. Timmins a second to see that email, but I can also walk you through that. So please do let me know if you prefer the oath or the solemn affirmation.
The oath, please.
Okay, in the case of the oath, I will read the following passage and you can respond. Do you swear that the evidence you shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Firth. We'll turn the floor over to you for an opening statement. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. This is my third time before the committee. I've been compelled to be here. The last month, virtually, everything reported about my company in the media and stated about me and my company has been false. I have submitted to the committee a complete list of all contracts we've been awarded from the government in our history. I have included the nominal value of the contract, and more importantly, the full amounts we have invoiced the government under those contracts. We have also included the total amount we have paid our subcontractors under those contracts. And as you can see, the amounts paid to GC Strategies are not the astronomical amount being claimed by some committee members. Since my last appearance before you, this committee has summoned many departments and their representatives with whom we have had dealings. The committee informed each of these representatives that we were criminals, forgers, and fraudulent. The committee said that if they did not terminate all our contracts and suspend our ability to obtain contracts, that they were negligent and complicit in misusing taxpayer money. The committee also strongly encouraged each department to refer these matters to the RCMP. As a result, and not surprisingly, each department complied, terminating our agreements and our ability to continue government work. In addition, they have confirmed the matters have been requested and referred to the RCMP for investigation. As a result, although I welcome an independent investigation, for it will exonerate me, and the committee has not chosen to wait for the results of that investigation, I will not be able to answer questions about the matters referred to the RCMP. I trust you'll understand. GC Strategies has appeared before this committee twice, giving hours of testimony. We have also cooperated throughout the entire study and provided all documentation requested of us. We have been portrayed as reluctant witnesses by some committee members and media. However, the truth is, we've always been accessible, willing to answer committee members' questions in writing. The committee has not once reached out for a response to question. Instead, the committee exercised the most extreme measures, and we had the full weight of the government come down on us. compelling us to be here by subpoena, knowing full well this is against medical advice as outlined in our doctor's notes we have provided as part of the evidence package. I'm certain any medical professional would attest that the threat of arrest and detainment would cause undue stress. Since our first publicized appearance, myself and my business partner have received hundreds of threatening and abusive emails, all of which have been documented and they have been shared. I would read these aloud, but to be frank, they are vile and not suitable for any audience. The nature of these communications, threatening our lives and the lives of our family and children, have given rise to our reasonable ask for future appearances to not be televised. The chair unanimously and without justification denied our request, intent on isolating Mr. Anthony and myself from one another and broadcasting to the result of the widest possible audience. Over the past few months, we have had images of our homes and the addresses of our personal dwellings published across media titles, journalists turning up to our private property, confronting family members, and our young children approached, and their privacy violated with strangers taking photographs of them whilst in the hockey changing rooms. Surely the members of this committee can agree this isn't acceptable output from this process. We offered to appear in public, but requested not to be televised over these concerns. We were rejected, we've been separated, and we're being televised. We can only conclude that this televised nature of today's meeting aids in political goal scoring while simultaneously using us as media fodder at the expense of our health and the safety of our families. This is neither fair nor reasonable. I've shown up and will answer questions to the best of my ability, but may require frequent breaks. I will answer questions for as long as I am able, but cannot guarantee I will be able to make it all the way through. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Firth. And we just ask if you do require a different break that you just advise us and let us know. We'll start with Mr. Barrett for 6 minutes, please.
Mr. Firth, it's correct that you have legal counsel with you this morning?
That's correct.
So this is the first time of your appearances where you have a lawyer present but didn't in previous appearances. Have you ever lied to a parliamentary committee before?
I think in previous testimony, you see the answer with that one, about the chalet and the cottage.
So is that a yes?
I advise you to go and watch my previous testimony.
Well, I was there, and I asked the question, and of course, you did lie about Mr. McDonald's secondary residence, quite famously on it not being a cottage, but in fact it being a chalet. Further, you lied about meeting government officials outside of government offices, and further, you lied about providing hospitality to government officials. There was a great deal of information that was requested of you that was not furnished to the committee, promising to tell the committee who in government contacted you about ArriveCan. That information hasn't been provided to us. You didn't disclose meetings with government officials, and you failed to provide documentation that the committee has asked you for. Last week, government officials announced that files concerning GC strategies, role and involvement in ArriveCan have been sent to the RCMP. Did the government make you aware of that? Yes or no, please?
No, they have not.
Has the RCMP contacted you about ArriveCan?
No, they have not.
So the RCMP has, further, they have not interviewed you?
That is correct.
Have you been contacted by the RCMP about any work relating to any companies or ventures that you're involved in and their work with the Government of Canada or government officials?
No, I have not.
Do you know if your partner, Darren Anthony, has been contacted by the RCMP to the same effect?
I do know, and he has not.
If requested by the RCMP, will GC Strategies files, computers, emails, cell phones, and any area where data is stored or devices that have been used to communicate with the Government of Canada as part of their investigation into the ArriveCan, will you voluntarily submit that information to the RCMP?
We will deal directly with the RCMP once they contact us.
Sir, how much did you state in your previous appearance before this committee were you paid to work on ArriveCan?
For the ArriveCan application build, which is what we gave our numbers to the committee for last year, we said it was approximately $11 million was the application build.
Okay. The Auditor General, though you've said that all of the reporting about your company since your last appearance has been false, there's been heavy media reporting about the work of Canada's Auditor General. She detailed a different number. Is the information that the Auditor General has submitted incorrect?
Yes, it is. We actually were asked by the Auditor General to give comment prior to the report being published, whether we could support the numbers that they were putting in there. And actually, if you remember from my last previous testimony when I was ridiculed and being called disingenuous for not having the true cost of ArriveCan, we discussed the fact that there were 3 COVID-19 pandemic contracts. There was not one that was solely set aside for ArriveCan. So I can understand why it was hard for the Auditor General, with her also indicating that some of the task authorizations for ArriveCan could have had resources doing no work. Since my testimony and how I got the numbers there, I painstakingly went through every single invoice, spoke to every consultant, and got an understanding of what their level of effort was for the ArriveCan application build. And my numbers were in line with what Mr. Utano testified last time.
Okay. That's information that you ought to have had at your last appearance, but I'll take the Auditor General's word that that the number was in excess of $19 million, which of course is not the number that you submitted to this committee. At your second appearance before this committee, you testified that you did not meet with government officials outside of government offices, and we now know that you did that on multiple occasions. Why did you lie to this committee?
It was not a lie. I just was unaware. I hadn't checked all of my Outlook, but I can tell the committee today that I have met with officials outside of work.
Of course, we know that, sir, and we understand that you're telling us that now, having been caught in the lie. The question is, why did you believe it was necessary to attempt that deception before this parliamentary committee?
It wasn't a deception. I just wasn't informed of all the meetings that I had or had not had. I wasn't have access to my Outlook.
What are the names of all of the government officials that you have met with outside of government offices?
I'm more than happy to provide that information in writing, but I'm not prepared to do that right now televised.
Are you able to name a single? Well, sir, it's not your discretion which answers that you're able to provide in writing. I'm asking you a question. Are you refusing to answer the question?
No, I gave you my answer. I'm not refusing to answer the question. I will give you the names.
So what are the names, sir? What are the names, sir?
That is, yeah, I have to interrupt. That is our time. Perhaps we can get back to it in the next round. Mr. Sousa, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Firth, before we begin, have you ever been approached separately by any individual members of this committee or any other committee besides the chair?
No,
have people tried to reach out to you?
Nope, nobody from the committee has.
Okay. And you've already indicated how much you've received for work you've done relative to the contracts with ArriveCan. How much was that?
I gave over on October approximately $11 million worth of invoices.
And how much commission was that? How much did you receive for your services? I know you have costs there, right?
Yeah, this is the gross number. Would be approximately $2.5 million was gross.
You mean net to you?
Net to me.
Great.
Less expenses. That's exactly gross. Less expenses, less tax.
I understand. In terms of politicians, has any elected officials ever approached you to negotiate a contract?
No, we have not.
Has any politicians or members of parliament in the past approached you to do a contract?
No, sir.
So your involvement, let's understand Cordell system for a sec. Explain to me that relationship and your involvement with that company.
So we had no relationship at all with Cordell. We purchased them in 2015 in April. and subsequently took 3 to 4 months to do a name change for CRA and PSBC to absorb those corporate requirements.
And Cordell had been a government contractor in the past?
I believe so, yes. We've never worked with Cordell ever, especially not prior to April 2015.
Is there involvement by you or GC Strategies prior to 2015? Have you been doing, how long have you been doing work for the government? I guess what I'm trying to get. How long have you been contracted? Okay. You besides GC Strategies?
Since 2007 was when I first started being in the IT section, services to the government.
And how much, do you recall how much you've received overall with the government of Canada, including those years?
How many contracts, sorry?
How much, how many contracts, how much money you've made over that period of time?
Probably close to 100 contracts in totality from 2007 to 2023.
And that process was a similar way you're doing it now? You've arranged a contract and then you subcontract to service providers and skill sets? Is that how it works?
Yeah, I've been working in the IT staffing industry since 2007, like the other 636 other firms that are out there.
So that's normal practice in industry and in other governments as well? Do you know?
Yeah, I can't speak to other industries, but in the federal government where I've been working since 2007, I can say that's normal practice.
And in your deliberations in coming here today, I mean, it's seen as been very tough on your family and yourself. What is it that people are perceived that you're trying to hide something? What is it that is concerning you here?
So it's actually just how this whole thing is being conducted. It's nothing about information and how it's being shared or even asking the questions. I mean, anybody in our industry or anybody in the 5,000 IT staffing firms employing $81,000, contributing $10 billion to the economy, knows exactly what our staff and what our business model is. It's people that are misinformed and misled are the ones who are up in arms understanding this. There's a cost of doing business, and 636 other firms have the same business processes as we do.
So when ArriveCan came to be, and the government was looking at trying to put this together, did you approach them or did someone approach you?
First time I knew that there was going to be a pandemic response contract, I was reached out to by PSPC. They were the ones informed me that there was going to be a contract issued to us. It was a pre-contract email saying, just, GC Strategies is being selected for a contract award of $2.35 million.
And who signed that email? Who did that come from?
That came from Angela Durgan of PSPC.
Prior to that, you had been dealing with Bottler AI and two founders of that company. And right. They're the ones that came to PSPC and came and complained about the processes of their contract, which there was no contract. Is that correct?
Correct.
And they issued concerns that there was privileged information, or I don't understand. Explain to me, what is Bottler AI's issue in regards to your engagement?
Well, that's actually a good question. We're still unclear of what the misconduct and allegations are towards our company. My understanding is it's being referred to the RCMP. We have not been contacted. So unfortunately, I cannot give comment on what those allegations are because we're just not aware what they are.
So you didn't have a contract and Bottler did not have a contract, but you were trying to promote Bottler in accessing opportunities with government situations. Is that correct?
Yeah. We actually, even at one time, we were starting to try and get them their own vehicle so the government could miss the middleman out and go direct to Bottler.
How many people did Bottler employ at that point?
They were a two-person company out of a penthouse.
And so they were trying to gain contracts with government through your support, through your relationships, through your experience. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, we were offering free business development and sales leads to help them get contracts within the federal government.
Yeah, that's our time, Mr. Sousa. Mrs. Vignola, please, for 6. Go ahead, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Firth, thank you very much for being here with us today. I know how difficult this might be. I'll start with questions that are quite straightforward that have to do with testimony that you've made in the past. In October 2022, at your first appearance before the committee, you stated that the government spoke to you to put in place a team that would work under its management and direction for a certain time as part of an equipment undertaking, which you agreed to. Thereafter, you said that you were very proud of the team that you provided to the Government of Canada, which managed and directed that team throughout the entire project. If I understood correctly, your role was solely to recruit. You didn't engage in any project management, any support. You didn't monitor the work that was being done by the people you recruited. Did I understand correctly?
That's correct. We also had no hand in operational budget management either.
OK. Merci. Dans le fond, vous...
Understood. So essentially, you were a middleman, an intermediary between the government and human resources when it came to payment. And you skimmed or you received 15 to 30% of the total amount owed.
Sorry, yeah, that is correct. We actually, it's in my evidence package I've given forth to you. Over the whole duration of GC Strategy's history with all federal contracts, we've actually approximately 21% is our gross margin for all 65 contracts we've had with the federal government.
D'accord.
I see. You also stated in October 2022, in response to a question where you were asked, as Mr. Sousa recently asked you a moment ago, whether it was elected representatives or officials that contacted you, and you said that it was officials who reached out to you, public servants. Was that also the case when it comes to the harassment application and ArriveCan? And was it also the case for the COVID Alert app, please? Could you tell me that?
So for COVID Alert, that was somebody from Canadian Digital Services reached out to me, understanding the work we have been doing previously on ArriveCan, and that was how the communication started. They were understanding what capacity we had for teams, what our teams were actually doing at ArriveCan, the types of categories and skill sets they had, and that was primarily for COVID Alert. Could you please repeat the other two?
En fait, les deux autres...
Well, the two others were to introduce certain measures during COVID. So you were also contacted by officials regarding the Butler AI harassment application and also ArriveCan app. Is that correct?
So yes, for the ArriveCan app, that was PSPC. That was a government official that reached out to us. But for the Butler, nobody actually reached out to us. That was just understanding that there was harassment charges that were heavily publicized in the public sector, public safety portfolio. And so that was when I reached out to Butler, understanding that there were several clients that could be in need of their services.
D'accord. Et concernant Butler AI...
I see. And concerning Butler AI, what occurred is that you were put under a contract that was previously awarded to Dalian and Coradix, if I've understood correctly.
Correct. We were advised by CBSA to work with Dalian and Coradix.
Et ce contrat était réservé à...
And that contract was set aside and awarded to an Indigenous company. At that point, did you get the sense that Dalian was using that as a cover, if you will, in a sense, when it came to statistics regarding contracts awarded to Indigenous persons? You're not Indigenous, from what I can understand, and Butler is not an Indigenous company or individual either, is it?
I'm sorry, I'm not the expert to answer that question. I'm not familiar with the Indigenous procurement process. I couldn't give comment on that. I'm sorry.
Merci.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to come back to COVID Alert. you stated that it was a Canadian Digital Services official who reached out to you. Were there officials from Health Canada who also reached out to you, please?
During the COVID alert inception of the contract, it was just purely Canadian Digital Services resources.
D'accord. Merci beaucoup.
I see. Thank you very much. I have about 30 seconds remaining. We received invoices, bank transfers from Dalian to GC Strategies. Now, I won't specify the amounts, if that's okay, but what I did observe was a transfer for Hudspeth CBSA. Now, I tried to locate the company. I found another family by the same name. Could you please tell me what or who Hudspeth CBSA is, please? In French, it's a different word, obviously, so that wouldn't make sense to you, perhaps.
Brief answer, Mr. Firth.
Hudspeth is a person. It's not a company. It's an individual.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bachrach, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Firth, I think I'll start with some of your previous testimony before this committee. In your previous appearance, when you were asked about the ArriveCan situation and what it reveals about the government's contracting process, you said, "I don't think it reveals anything. The reality is that it would have been a perfect execution if the 4 deliverables had been done on time and been of the standard CBSA would have approved and paid. This was not a contracting issue." So since then, we have the Auditor General's scathing report. We have the Office of the Procurement Ombudsman, another scathing report looking at the contracting and procurement process. Do you still stand by that view that this was not a contracting issue, given all the irregularities that have been very well documented?
Can you qualify exactly the previous testimony? Because that doesn't seem like something that resonated with what I said. I don't think I blame the contracting for the ArriveCan. I think I explained the contracting, saying there were 3 sole source national security exemptions.
Okay, well, you said this was not a contracting issue.
I'm not sure what the context, that seems like it's out of context. If you could kindly give me the information prior to that.
I think the question was about what the ArriveCan situation reveals about the government's contracting process. That's what you were asked about. And you said that you didn't think it revealed anything, that you felt like the problem was not a contracting issue, it was a performance issue. And I guess
PSPC did follow all procurement processes in issuing those contracts for COVID pandemic response, or one of which being the ArriveCan app.
Okay, so despite all of the findings that have been brought forth by the ombudsperson and the Auditor General, you still feel like this was a performance issue and not a contracting issue. But I'll move on. I think, Mr. Firth, you've portrayed the services that your company provides as one of IT recruitment, essentially assembling teams of IT professionals for the government. And yet there's evidence that actually what was happening was the opposite, that the government was finding IT professionals that could provide services and then directing them to work with you. Is that what has happened in the past, specifically with Mr. McDonald and other firms?
No, I think you're referring to one specific component where the firm approached CBSA, and shortly thereafter, those names appeared on one of our contracts. Mm-hmm. That was, part of the government they have a process. They have a problem. They have to find a solution. And they either have to go to an RFP, which sometimes takes 3 to 6 months, or they look to use an existing vehicle. I can assume that maybe the opportunity was time sensitive, and using procurement processes, 3 to 6 months would have taken too long. They'd have asked them to come to myself or any other existing contract to try and get the work done sooner.
I guess the hard thing for me to understand is how the public gets value out of this, because essentially the government has identified a contractor that can do the work for them, but instead of simply setting up a contract with that company, they're suggesting that they work through your firm, which takes a commission. And so the actual contract ends up costing the Canadian taxpayer more than it would have if they had dealt with them individually. Is that a cost? That's a fair characterization.
That's a fair characterization. And again, until the processes which have been in place since 2003 change, where the government can be a little more nimble and execute on directed contracts quicker, it's going to continue to happen. It's very frequent and commonplace where if an RFP if there is a solution that's needed quickly, then it's always the point of least resistance is to use an existing contract versus doing a new RFP.
So there's a situation set up whereby you have this existing contract that's somewhat nebulous and can act as a container for a wide variety of services that the government goes out and identifies and then funnels them through your existing contracting framework. And then you take a commission off the top of that. And
that would not be my contracts, because my contracts were very specific to pandemic response. So you couldn't have just used that as a generalized bucket. Those are the large contracts you hear, which are called omnibuses, which have 30 or 40 different categories on place. And then those ones would be the catch-alls for the majority of the projects that go on within a department. Ours are very, very specific. Like, you have to always make sure that the requirement you're bringing up is in alignment with the original statement of work that came with those contracts. So if it falls outside of those parameters, I think Mr. McDonald kind of gave testimony to this, they're managers who often don't get funding or need funding for projects would put an ArriveCan twist to it, or they'd put a pandemic twist to what they were doing. This is why, again, the Auditor General's report is inaccurate, because as she attested to in her report, there's actually, you can't get a true cost for ArriveCan because there could be other projects or other resources associated with that cost. Does that make sense?
Isn't that a problem, though, if the government auditor can't trace the money to establish whether the Canadian taxpayer got value for that money, and there's no transparency on which projects are actually being paid for under different contracts? Isn't that a problem? Like, it seems like that's one of the core problems that the Auditor General has highlighted in her report.
Yes, that is a problem.
Okay. How many projects have you worked directly with Mr. McDonald on over the years?
I have had three contracts with the COVID pandemic response contracts.
And how long have you known him? I think this was the subject of previous testimony, but just to refresh our memory.
I think around 2010 was when we first met.
And you've had 3 contracts since that time?
Yeah.
How many times has Cordex and Dalian been a subcontractor on your contracts, or have you subcontracted to them?
They have never subcontracted through my contracts. And I think through Dalian and Cordex, it'll be a handful of times. I don't have the exact number.
Fewer than 10? More than 5?
Fewer than 10. More than
5? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Backrack. We now have Mrs. Block for 5, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to circle back to some of the questions that my colleague was asking in regards to who from the government would have contacted you for these contracts. And I know you provided us with a name for a contract, and you stated that it was Angela Durrigan from PSPC who had signed off on an email. I think that was in regards to the first contract that you had received. But in fact, you received 4 contracts for ArriveCan, 3 which were non-competitive and 1 that was supposed to be competitive. So I'm going to ask if you could provide us with the names of those contacts on those contracts.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for the question, but they were never ArriveCan contracts. They were all pandemic response contracts, and ArriveCan was not solely used on just one contract alone. It was used across 2 of them. So they're pandemic response ones as opposed to 4 ArriveCan contracts.
Okay, well, I do understand that the national security exemption was put in place during the pandemic. And so can you provide us with the names of the contacts from the government when you were awarded the 4 contracts?
So Angela Durgan was 3 of them. And I don't have the lady's full name for the 4th one, but I'm more than happy to share that with you after this.
I would appreciate that, because this information was requested from you last October, and you promised to undertake to provide those names for us, and you didn't. So I'm a little bit leery about that.
No, I did provide those names as part of our evidence package. I gave all 3 emails. There were the contract awards, and all 3 of them showed Angela Durgan. The reason why the 4th one wasn't provided, because that was only asked for the COVID contracts, not for the 4th one.
Okay, so we're going to make it.
Was provided.
So we're going to make a distinction in regards to your contracts as to whether it was the pandemic, COVID, or ArriveCan. I got that. So you will
National
provide
security exemption.
Yes, national security exemption, absolutely. So you have agreed to provide us with the name of the other individual that you were in contact with.
Yes, I will.
Thank you very much. The Auditor General, and I understand that you've testified here today that in her report she didn't provide accurate information, but she found that GC Strategies was involved in the development of a contract from the Government of Canada to your firm, valued at $25 million, that you received in May of 2022. Who did you communicate with from the Government of Canada while you were helping to create that criteria?
So first of all, the committee has subpoenaed me here to speak on behalf of things that I can talk about. Also, my understanding is these allegations have been moved to the RCMP, and in fear of interfering with the RCMP investigation, I don't think I can comment on that right now.
So it's my understanding from testimony just a few minutes ago that you have been contacted by the RCMP. You're not under investigation right now, but you know what the RCMP is investigating?
I have the same information everybody else. I have what I'm watching on testimony. I'm seeing what committee members are putting on Twitter. So I'm assuming all of the PSBC's testimony said all the findings from the Auditor General's report has been sent through there. So again, with that being a broad stroke and with actually not getting disclosure like we asked for prior to being here, understanding what those documents and that information was, I cannot comment right now on that information.
You're not going to let us know who it was you were meeting with as you were constructing a contract that you knew you would end up getting?
Yeah, that's your words, not mine. I'm just saying right now, as a result of this being pushed to RCMP, with all efforts of the committee behind it, unfortunately, I cannot comment on an ongoing RCMP investigation.
Okay, well, I guess what I would ask is this commonplace? We'll get away from the actual contract in question, but is this commonplace for IT firms, for consulting firms to sit at the table and help determine the criteria for a contract that they are going to actually be bidding on?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can comment on that. I can't comment on what everybody. I don't do that personally. I can't comment on what every other of the 635 other firms do.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
The witness is refusing to answer questions under the auspices of a hypothetical, according to him, and he is required to answer the questions put to him by this committee, unless I'm mistaken. And if I am mistaken, I just ask for you to correct my understanding. But the witness is required to provide this information, and his lawyer would be able to tell him that it wouldn't prejudice a police investigation.
It's a fair point. We do require witnesses to answer questions. Actually, from looking at the item from swearing in witnesses refusal to answer questions, a failure to reply truthfully may give rise to a charge of contempt in the House. We will get to the next intervention, which is Miss Atwin, and then we will have a chance with Mr. Deltel. But we will be having a break after the next round that perhaps Mr. Firth can confer with his lawyer, and we can get back to this issue. Ms. Atwin, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Firth, for being here. I'm gonna kind of bounce all over the place, so forgive me. But I'd like to start with there was a question around Cordell, and I just need a bit of clarification. So, in relation to Cordell, you stated that you bought the company in 2015, and who did you buy it from?
Chris Jurowitz, I think, was the gentleman that owned the company.
Okay, because according to my notes, I had that Mr. Anthony and yourself, as well as Mr. White, were all listed as on the corporate info website. So was this company not registered prior to 2015?
It was operating doing other government contracts, but myself, Mr. Anthony, our other business partner, when we were a 3-person team, we were the ones that purchased it in 2015. And then we subsequently after that, we applied to CRA and you applied to PSBC to do an official name change so we can put our own brand to it.
Okay. And you also mentioned that you've been, working within contracting with the federal government since 2007. And would that be under your name as an individual or another company's name? Or if we were to search that information, what would we be searching?
I used to work for a company called Veritech, which has recently been purchased by, well, not recently, but it's been purchased by Express Manpower. I was solely with those guys since 2007 until 2015.
And it was all IT related work with the government?
That's exactly what we do right now. Yeah.
Okay. So I did want to address, in your opening comments, you mentioned some of the ways this is impacting you personally, as well as your family and your children. And there's certainly, that should never happen. And I apologize for what's happening, as far as your personal life. And I'm not surprised, sadly, because of the rhetoric that's been used around this issue. We hear a lot of it in the House as well. And even as Liberal members of this committee, a lot of it's actually directed at us as well. So I'd really like to clear up some of the things that we're hearing. Things like, Liberal insiders got rich. So I'd like to ask you, do you have any personal connections to the Prime Minister, to our cabinet ministers, to any of us as Liberal members of this committee?
No, I do not.
Okay. The other big thing is the way it's characterized is that, GC Strategies was a 2-man operation in a basement that basically had, according to the Auditor General, $19 million. Essentially, it seems that it's being portrayed like, cash was dumped on your lap in this amount of money. And so really that money flows through your contractors, your subcontractors, and you mentioned the amount that you would have received personally. But I do have a question about the commission piece. So it's cited often as 15 to 30% commission. Can you account for this fluctuation? Is that a common thing?
Yeah, so it all depends on, it can be, I'll dumb it down and make it as boring as possible. How it typically works is you get a agreed rate to the client, let's say $1,500 a day for your services. It's then on us, once that contract's been awarded, to try and find that resource. And at that point, you negotiate their rate. So if their rate's $1,000, you've now made 25%. If their rate is $1,200, you've now made X%. So it all depends on what negotiations are between what the rate is to the Crown and what the person you've found is. That delta in between is the margin.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. So you have addressed a little bit about the Auditor General's report, and it was good to know that you had been approached for comment around some of the numbers that she was sharing. Were you approached by the procurement ombud prior to him writing his report?
No, I was not.
Okay. And do you feel that your input with the Auditor General was reflected?
No. We commented on 2 parts, and they were not included, or really our thoughts were considered. This is why one of the biggest ones was the $19.1 million, because you'd understand what the uproar is going to be and how it's going to be used against you when you've been citing, like CBSA officials have been citing, that the number's closer to 12 million. And again, there's lots of reasons why there could be discrepancies. We understand the financial systems and the codes aren't the best at CBSA. Furthermore, is the approximation and the valuation that was provided in the AG report was billing up until May 2023, whereas we previously gave numbers from the application build, which finished in July of 2022. So there's another year's worth of billing there, which may not even be an ArriveCan. But again, no one knows if it's ArriveCan or not because how things are tagged internally.
Okay. And To the extent you're aware, can you describe how the government may have tracked your performance on ArriveCan contracts?
There's quarterly reviews, quarterly reports we have to send in the PSPC, which shows burn rates, which essentially means how much the resource is burning. Let's say a task authorization starts at $200,000. Each month you have to say how much that resource has used up against that. So not really from a performance. That's more done, like I said, performance is done by an employee, but we track the finances typically with PSPC to understand, is a task authorization running out? Is a contract running out? Is there time to do renewals? So that's the extent of how we're monitored from the government organization. Everything else, like project management, budget, and everything, is taken care of by them.
Thank you very much. That is our time, I'm afraid. Mrs. Vignola for 2.5, please.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Firth, earlier when we were talking about COVID alert, you stated that a government official reached out to you from Shared Services, Digital Services, Canada, who had heard about you. Did that government official tell you who referred him or her to you?
No, he did not. It was more a case of, we understand the work you're doing on ArriveCan, and that's kind of how the introduction started.
OK. Parce que...
I see. Basically, COVID alert was being supervised by PHAC, the Public Health Agency of Canada, someone you know well and someone you had dealings with regarding COVID alert, was transferred to that department, who won a position in a competition, and that is why I asked the question about the referral. Thank you very much. Now, you also stated that the mistakes on the part of the Auditor General may have been due to the codes that CBSA uses that are not always so clear. In your opinion, when it comes to procurement and contracting, do they need to tidy up their house at the CBSA in order to clarify what those codes are, such that the transparent government, quote unquote, is truly transparent, and such that data is much more clear in the eyes of the public and also for the politicians sitting around this table?
Yes, I agree, they need to do that.
Donc,
therefore, you have no particular input on this topic, even though you received, and you stated this yourself, well, you had to deal with the adverse effects and ramifications due to the fact that the codes are not clear enough, as you stated yourself.
Yeah, so I don't have access to the codes. All I have access to is the reporting and the numbers that are completely contradictory to what I have. Again, I have the luxury of speaking to every one of the 100 consultants we put through during the pandemic to get a true understanding of their level of effort for what they were working on and what they were doing. So if you're coming in as an Auditor General, you would not have access to the detail that I currently have, but you'd have access to calculating task authorizations. And the truth being there as well, that not all task authorizations are fully utilized. So you may see one for $200,000, but only 120 was actually used on that task authorization. So this is, again, where these inflated numbers can come from, because there's just not the financial system in place that can do real-time health checks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bacharach, go ahead, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2019, and this is pre-COVID. This, I believe, was in reference to a chatbot product that Bottler had developed. And there's some communication between Mr. McDonald and yourself. And I'll go back to your previous comments from the last round, where you said that the reason that the government might direct contractors to work through your standing contract with the government is because it's faster and more efficient than going through a procurement process, which could take several months. That's a fair characterization. I see you sort of nodding. Is that fair, Mr. Firth?
Yeah, not just mine or any existing contract.
So here's a communique from Mr. McDonald, November 18th, 2019, and this is an email to you, and he says, look, Christian, I can't solicit this as a government department, and I know, I think there's an opportunity for you, GC Strategies, to partner with these guys, he means Bottler, and knowing what you can do in this town, I think you can turn this into an enterprise product. What did Mr. McDonald mean by, I can't solicit this as a government department? It sounds like it doesn't have to do with efficiency. It sounds like it has to do with working around some kind of rules that are in place to prevent him from going out there and handpicking contractors.
Thank you for the question. And the truth is, I can't comment on what Mr. McDonald was writing or why he was writing those things. I'm sorry, at that point, I was not writing on behalf of Mr. McDonald, so I can't attest to what he meant by that.
Like, I guess what it looks like to someone from on the outside is it looks like Mr. McDonald is doing your bidding and trying to set you up for turning this into an enterprise product. I assume because you would be able to charge a substantial commission if the product that Bottler had developed became an enterprise product. Like, do you agree that this is a wholly inappropriate role for someone high up in CBSA to be playing?
Again, I can't speculate on what the intentions were with that email. I mean, everybody can interpret it how they want. I just can't speculate, and I don't really know the intent behind that email.
I find that difficult to believe, Mr. Firth. Like,
it's the truth. Like, I was not in Mr. McDonald's brain when he was writing that. I can't make assumptions on what the intentions were for that email.
Thanks. That is our time. Yeah, that is our time.
I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Backrack. Mr. Deltel, please go ahead for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Now, obviously, we want to get to the bottom of what is the worst financial scandal of the history of the Government of Canada. This is a contract that was supposed to start at about $80,000, ended up in an orgy of spending of over $60 million, which is over 750 times more expensive than what was expected. This is not right. Canadians need to understand why there was this boondoggle that they're still paying for to date. We know that GC Strategies was threatened with arrest regarding testifying here, which attests to the fact that there was no confidence in the fact that you may have refused to testify before this committee, but I'm afraid you have under an obligation to do so. Mr. Chairperson, this is not the first time that Mr. Firth is testifying. There were 2 previous testimonies. First, regarding the testimony, your previous testimony, did you lie, yes or no, in your previous evidence?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please? I was at some feedback on my microphone.
Avez-vous menti?
Did you lie in your 2 previous appearances before this committee? Yes or no?
For 2 committee? I made a mistake with a cottage and a chalet last time I was here.
Okay.
And again, it's not a lie. I mean, the actual irony is that it was referred to as a cabin.
Et puis l'hospitalité avec le whisky sur.
And what of the whiskey and the hospitality involved?
Yeah, there's been previous testimony where there was whiskey tasting, and I think it was mentioned that that was put out to government officials, and it was also put out to contractors, and those government officials have since said that they got permission from their superiors and paid their way.
Prenons maintenant le contrat tel qu'il.
Now, the contract as it was awarded, it's the contract that you executed. At what point did you realise that $80,000 was insufficient and that things were starting to cost a lot? At $1 million, $2 million, $3 million? At what point did you clue into the fact that this was going to go through the roof and it was going to become exceedingly expensive?
So again, thank you for the question. Like that's not my determination. The first contract award was for $2.35 million. That was the one that was the first COVID contract. Subsequently, there were amendments that were made. You have to bear in mind, I think testimony mentioned that national security exemptions only were to last for 3 months. So there had to be a decision made by the government to either put a larger number and keep doing amendments versus keep going back and retendering and redo it, which isn't a fast process, we know that, to retender and restructure a contract every 3 months. My understanding was it did jump, the one contract we're talking about, that went from 2.35 and it went to 13.9. But my understanding was every time there was amendment, it was published on Buy and Sell, which has 635 other companies can challenge. And it was also put in front of the House, and MPs voted in the House every single time there was an amendment. So it wasn't like I knew, but everybody knew that the prices were raising.
Qui s'assurait de la...
Who monitored the quality of the work that you were doing? Overnight, you can't just go from $80,000 to $60 million without someone sounding the alarm bells and saying something is awry. Who monitored the quality of your work?
We'd had 4 or 5 government officials that was monitoring the quality of our work. Well, we were not, there were other prices associated to just ArriveCan and the application bill that we're not privy to. So we were not part of the 19.1 or the 11 million to the 60. We were from the 0 to the 11 or 19.1, depending on which article you want to read.
comprend là, que quand arrive la COVID, il y a des...
Now, when COVID struck, of course, there were going to be exceptions. Everyone understands that. But there's a distinction to be made between being very active and inflating the bill to the tune of 700 times larger exponentially. That's what Canadians wanted to get to the bottom of. When did you realise that this was a phenomenal cost overrun and yet it was lacking in quality? At what point, please?
Well, first of all, we've submitted over 1,500 invoices monthly. So again, I want to get the illusion of everybody's thinking right now, we were never given a check for $20 million on day one. We've done 1,500 monthly approved submitted invoices for the last 3 years to get to whatever amount you want to listen to, 19.1 or 11. We were not responsible for alerting any alarm bells. We were performing, we hit 171 releases of the application on time. Every time Public Health Agency changed the policy, we'd have to amend the application, and that there in itself, the fact we were hitting all of our targets meant that we were doing a good job, but we also don't control what the budget is. That's out of our realm.
Vous faisiez, ouais, je prends votre propos.
Our time. Mr. Shawari, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Firth, I'd like to focus on 3 areas, and I only have 5 minutes. Number one, in your testimony, you referred to 3 companies. One, Vertec, and I would ask you to give us the proper spelling of that, which you were an employee between 2007 to 2015. Then I understood that there was a company named Clorix, which there had 3 partners, and then in 2015, 2 of you bought this company, which then applied for a name change and CRA, etc. It became GC Strategy. So are you telling me, or is my understanding of the fact that you were employee at Vertec and you also had a company, were part of a 3-man show during that period?
No, from 2007 till March 2015, I was an employee of Veritech, which is VERITAAQ. I was there for 8 years. Okay. Then myself and my 2 business partners, we approached a company called Cordeal, who had previously been working independently from us. And when we purchased them in April and subsequently did the name changes and everything else to rebrand.
Okay. So in your due diligence, in buying that company, did you look into any type of connections that they had with the government and or any contracts that they had worked in the past and projected contracts that they had in the future?
So we went back 5 years and so we saw the contracts they previously had with PSPC. And then I think when we purchased them, they only had 1 contract outstanding with Natural Resources Canada.
Are you in a position to tell us how much you bought it and how much of that was goodwill?
I can't. I don't think I can disclose that right now.
Okay. We'll leave it at that. Now, coming to your, again, opening remarks, second area, you have consistently said the application build, and you've emphasized this on the build, where we know that the Auditor General has said this total application build and support and all of those things, it can be estimated around 60 million. We don't know that number is right or not, but and you are telling us that it's your part of ArriveCan build was $11 million. Can you clarify the difference when you specifically were to use ArriveCan build, GC strategy, and the big picture of what has mushroomed into, or potentially has mushroomed into, about $60 million?
Yeah, again, we were only servicing the build. So when you look at call centers, I think Service Canada had $7 or $8 million for a call center. There was cloud services with AWS and Microsoft. There was other components like cybersecurity. There was data management. There was, I think there was a component for character recognition. There were things that we weren't involved in. We had a core team that was responsible for developing the app on the web, Android and iOS.
Okay,
anything
perfect.
And no back-end components.
So you're in a position of those invoices. You haven't been asked to provide those invoices. Good of you that you've gone through and you've got an understanding. And you are claiming that it was roughly about $1 million, and you're saying net, you have shown a net income of $2.5 million off of that 11. Am I right?
Approximately $2.5 million.
Yeah. Okay. So with about 1 minute and 10 seconds, I'd like to go back to another comment that you made, and that's the third area. You talked about the rate to the crown. Okay. And the rate to the crown, how is that rate determined? Is it determined by you, or is it determined by the crown?
It's a combination. So when you submit the RFP, if there's multiple options, then there will be what they call a median band, where they'll take all of the bids and they'll understand what the median price out between $1,500 to $1,200. Then it'll be around $1,350 is what they'll say is the fair price for the crown. That's what they've determined it to be.
Okay, so crown determines the crown rate based on a methodology, correct? Now, when you go and bid, you bid on that crown rate. It's not that you set the crown rate or any of the 636 cents the crown rate, correct?
It's off market rate. Okay, so what that means is this is essentially why I guess this process was put in place in 2003 to the private sector, is to be competitive and keep the prices down for the crown. You need to have 636 people bidding on something every time.
Fair enough. So the rate is set up by the crown based on a market rate, and then you will basically go back and try to negotiate with resources, and whatever margin is left is yours. It's not that you are increasing the crown rate, established rate, correct?
Yeah. Once the rate is determined, the crown, it's up to us to negotiate the resource. And
okay, I will come back to you again on that because I'm out of time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jouari. It's 12:06. We will suspend for 10 minutes and start round 3 at 12:16 on the dot. We're suspended.